Yeah. Good afternoon, Chair Bozen and members of the Judiciary Committee. I'm Senator Megan Hunt, MEGAN-HUNT, and I'm here to present LB854, a bill that would require all local, state, and federal law enforcement officers in Nebraska to display appropriate identification while performing their official duties, and to prohibit any law enforcement officer from concealing their identity with a mask or disguise that isn't for legitimate medical or physical protection from certain occupational hazards. This serves two purposes. One, to prevent anonymity of officers in the performance of their duties while interacting with the public, and two, to deter bad actors from impersonating a law enforcement officer. Under this bill, officers engaged in covert or undercover operations are exempted. Appropriate identification would include the officer's name, badge number, and the officer's employing law enforcement agency. My primary motivation with this bill was to address ICE, because they are the primary law enforcement agency whose officers have been widely observed attempting to conceal their identities while engaging with the public over the past year or so. There's also been an increase in people impersonating ICE agents in the process of committing crimes. LB854 is drafted to apply across the board to law enforcement entities at all levels, state, local, and federal. It does not single out anyone for stricter requirements. Requiring identification for any law enforcement makes sense, and it's an important civil liberty protection for our citizens, whether they come in contact with a city police officer, a county sheriff, or an ICE officer. They deserve to know that an officer that might be giving them instructions, pulling them over, entering their home, arresting them, or detaining them is a legitimate officer. If there's ever an officer incident in which excessive force is used, it's important for the public and the officer's employing agency to be able to connect them to the incident and proceed accordingly and take any necessary disciplinary measures. This bill also honors and respects the positions of law enforcement by prohibiting people with ill intentions from wearing a badge or title they didn't earn or impersonating a legitimate officer. Requiring officers to wear their identification enhances public trust and cooperation with law enforcement. Anonymity only increases suspicion and mistrust. In this time of heightened volatility in citizen-police interactions, this is an important way to help lower the temperature a bit and allow officers to do their work in a way that is accountable to the public. For the vast majority of officers that take great pride in their profession, those that hide their faces or their credentials do a disservice to their colleagues by discrediting their work and eroding public trust. We've all seen what's happened in Minnesota and elsewhere, where ICE officers that killed innocent citizens attempted to conceal their names and their faces. Officers in other jurisdictions have been seen wearing ski masks, bandanas, and other improvised face coverings. As far as a concrete example right here at home, several women taking in an Omaha raid that involved masked agents late last year told the Omaha World-Herald some agents treated them with undue force, mocked them, and told them they, quote, didn't deserve rights, unquote. There are a handful of situations in which officers might have a legitimate need to wear a disguise while going undercover, and that is accounted for in this bill. The bill also provides detailed exemptions for situations in which an officer may need to use a face shield, helmet, or respirator as part of their work. In America, in Nebraska, we do not believe in secret police. The reasons why are manifold. There's no other way to put it. There's accountability, trust in law enforcement, and more importantly, being able to tell who's a cop and who's not. If you can't tell that, that's dangerous. For one thing, the masked intruder who killed Speaker Melissa Hortman in Minnesota was impersonating a law enforcement officer. And it's confusing to people when it becomes normalized that law enforcement doesn't have to identify themselves in the course of their work before detaining you or arresting you or even entering your home. If we are going to have officers showing up at people's doors asking for citizenship papers or pulling children out of schools or asking someone to leave their vehicle, we must provide a way for citizens to know who they are interacting with and if that person is actually who they say they are and if they have the authority to make those demands. I have something to distribute here. This is by former Lincoln Police Chief Tom Cassidy, and it's an op-ed that he wrote for the Lincoln Journal-Star last month. And it's titled, "Support for DHS Comes with Call for Restraint and Accountability." In it, retired Chief Tom Cassidy argues that ICE needs to, quote, "ditch the mask to enhance public trust in their operations." Sheriff Cassidy writes, after describing tense and aggressive interactions between ICE and protesters, quote, "Hiding your identity does not help. About 700,000 municipal police officers, deputy sheriffs, and state troopers wear a name tag on their uniform every day, and they make tens and thousands of felony arrests every year. They don't conceal their identity. Ditch the mask, speak slowly and calmly, create space from agitated protesters, back up, avoid physical contact whenever possible, wait until later if necessary, don't use profanity, stay away from the front and rear of motor vehicles. Don't discharge a canister of pepper spray in the face of a restrained arrestee. In short, de-escalate whenever possible. When your actions appear unreasonably aggressive, it makes you and everyone else less safe, not more so." I have frightened constituents telling me this is not the way they believe law enforcement should be acting. There has to be a line somewhere for states where we outlaw the mistreatment of our people by federal agents. At some point, I think the answer needs to be no for Nebraska, and that's what we need to try and do by standing up for our people. We need to establish limits as far as how far we're going to allow the federal government to go within our jurisdiction of our state and how many rights we're going to allow them to trample, how much uncertainty and fear we're going to allow them to put into our people. I think it's an issue of state sovereignty. Free countries do not have masked secret police that operate without accountability, with impunity, and that's my reason for bringing this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions from the committee? All right, I assume you're staying close. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you.
That's okay.
Senator Roundtree.
Thanks so much, Chair Bosman. And thanks so much, Senator Hunt, for your openness for bringing the bill. As you have been out in your district, have you encountered members that have been personally impacted by the bill that you're bringing?
I have, the people in my district, in District 8, are incredibly civically engaged. And a lot of those folks will turn up at a protest. You can count on a lot of my folks to be there. And even those that don't choose to engage civically in that way, you know, no matter what their political leanings are, the majority of Republicans also say that they support law enforcement officers identifying who they are. Over 65% of them say they should always have their name on their uniform and they should always be operating in uniform. Over 80% say they should always be in uniform. So, yeah, the people of my district have reached out to me specifically about this policy, and I have heard many stories about it.
And then secondly, this is a personal question. If you, and you don't have to answer, but if you've ever been stopped by law enforcement speeding or parking or anything of that nature, have they been masked or you've always been able to identify?
I've always been able to identify them.
Okay.
And I'll also say I always deserved it.
Thank you so much.
I can't get away with anything. Don't follow that up with another question. Thank
you so much. I appreciate it.
Senator Hallstrom.
Senator Hunt, do you see a differentiation between identifying the official by the uniform or a badge or a name as opposed to the facial coverings in terms of, you know, just point out it. I've tried to read some background on this and see the pros and the cons, and obviously one aspect of the facial coverings is that there are people that do publish information, they take videos, the officer it's known, and perhaps worse yet, their family's known, and things of that nature. Would it be sufficient to have readily identifiable information in terms of name or badge as opposed to both that and prohibiting any facial covering?
My position is You know, we don't wear masks when we make laws, and we get doxxed, we get targeted with threats because of the work we do here in this building. Judges don't wear their robes and then wear a balaclava with it too. They don't wear masks, and they get targeted all the time. I don't think that law enforcement should be able to hide their faces. I think hiding your face is like hiding democracy. It's like hiding the, you know, it's just completely against what we believe in as Americans. I think if they're showing their badge number and they're, you know, you can see that they're with the troopers, or they're with local police, or they're with ICE, or whatever it is, and they've got their name on there, you can still expose their identity from that too. You know, that won't keep them from being known. And I actually think that this concern about quote-unquote doxing is a consequence of people today being a little bit too online instead of actually knowing each other face to face and being part of a local community. You know, I think we're talking about the difference between like having somebody's name published on the internet versus someone getting shot in the face. And to me, those are like very different crimes, or very, very different types of aggression. And in this country, we've never had a masked police force, and we cannot start.
Okay, and you mentioned the impersonating a police officer in the tragedy in Minnesota. Do you think this law would have made, I mean, isn't that person still going to impersonate an officer, and
Yeah,
whether he follows the law or not, you've got the same potential for tragedy?
That's a very fair point, and I think, you know, that's not the only time that's ever happened either. You know what I mean? It's just like a really high-profile example. What would be a more practical application of that is like these people wearing sweatsuits and masks and bandanas, and they're going up to cars and rapping on the car window with a baton and pulling people out of their car and beating them and putting them in handcuffs. And then it's later disclosed that those people were not part of any law enforcement agency at all. Or somebody wearing a cop outfit with no identification on it, detaining an immigrant woman, an undocumented woman, and forcing her to perform sexual favors on him, and then he's saying he'll let her go if she does it. And then he turns out to not be law enforcement either. Like, it's just that when people in this country know that it's normalized that a cop might not identify themselves, and sorry I'm saying cop, you know what I mean, like law enforcement of any kind, they will start to wonder what will happen to them if they don't comply. If the people in this country can expect that law enforcement will always identify themselves, they're not going to be a mass secret police force, then when somebody does try to commit a crime by impersonating an officer, that's a lot easier to tell that that's what's going on.
Yeah, but I might question that those same people that are impersonating a law official in the multitude of ways that you said, they can identify themselves, they can say that they're a law enforcement official. So I get your suggestion to address the real law enforcement and maybe put some restrictions on them, but I don't think it necessarily solves the other side of the problem.
Well, you're on judiciary, you know, like you hear about crime every day in here, and there's probably every single crime you can say, well, people will still do it, so why do anything? I don't agree with that. I think we can still do something.
Some do.
It will decrease the instances of the crime. It'll improve life.
Senator Storr.
Thank you, Chair Boslin, and thank you, Senator Hunt. The one just generally question I've had regarding the bill, and this, I've contemplated this on a variety of things, so not just this issue. But what authority, when we look at the supremacy clause, what authority the individual states have over federal agents or federal regulations? And is that something that you can walk me through a little bit?
Well, I can try to walk you through it. I don't know if anyone on earth would believe that I have the authority to explain this, but we did review legal briefs on this subject, and the general consensus in those briefs is that laws of this kind are not constitutionally permitted or prohibited, like it hasn't really been tested. In California, they passed a law like this, but it only applied to federal officers, not state and local officers, and so that's like a completely different type of case. And you know, it's likely to be a test case, and it's not about like the constitutionality of the concept, but it's about the different treatment of state and federal officers. So what this bill does is it says that we're treating them all the same. It doesn't dictate or restrict federal officers' work. It doesn't single out federal officers. It just shows that in this state we want to have a fairly easy set of rules to follow for just keeping the officer's identity visible. So other states have introduced bills like this, like, I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, Kansas, Tennessee, Washington, 10, California's passed, Washington State's passed. So, I mean, I think that what I brought to you here is a good start. I think it's fine, and you attorneys can tell me if it's not.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
On LB854 first, there were 152 proponent comments submitted, 45 opponent comments, and no neutral comments submitted. There was one ADA testimony on LB854 in support from Angela Conette, and this testimony will be included in the official hearing transcript and the testifier included on any committee statement that is published. This testimony has also been provided to all members of the committee. With that, welcome back, Senator Hunt.
Thank you, Chair Bozen, and thank you, members of the Judiciary Committee. I want to thank everybody who came out here to testify today. I know that many people traveled significant distance, and also many people came, potentially at some risk to themselves. I know we have people from the immigrant and migrant community here, or people who are close to those who are, and I want to especially thank and acknowledge you for, the vulnerability you share with us in sharing your story. My whole thing with this is just what I have continued to say, that it is un-American to have a secret masked police force in our country. And law enforcement officers are civilians. They're part of the public. They're like us. They're not above the public. And it's part of the job of law enforcement, and for that matter, politicians too, to be identifiable because of the profound authority that's bestowed upon us to affect the lives of the people that we serve and represent. And the ability to use force against people is a huge responsibility, and it requires very high standards of conduct. And it can and should be revoked when it's abused, that authority. I don't think that it's doxing federal agents for the public to know who they are. We are supposed to know who they are because that's how we hold them accountable. That's why police officers wear visible badge numbers and name tags. That's why we know who they are. I was always taught that if a police officer approaches you and you don't know them or whatever, like, you should ask for their name and badge number, that you should write that down so that you know that that person is someone who's going to be accountable to you in the system that they're representing. And the responsibilities that these people are given, which are vast, are not compatible with anonymity. So I appreciate the time here today. This is my last hearing ever in the Nebraska legislature in 8 years. And, I think we're leaving on a really good note. I think that this bill represents sort of the themes that I've really tried to fight for over the last 8 years. Accountability for power and opportunity and equality for the people who feel most vulnerable in our state. So, I want to thank my staff, Hannah, for being with me for 8 years, for 6 years on this work, and especially, above all, thank the testifiers who, bear so much weight of the responsibility of holding us accountable. So thank you.
Congratulations on your last hearing.
Thank you, Chair Bossen.
Yes. All right, are there any questions for Senator Hunt? Senator Storr.
Just want to make sure you don't need a picture.
Dan,
Your
what?
last hearing.
Senator, we already got it.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you all
well,
so much.
Yes,
Have a
that
good
will
one.
conclude our hearing on LB854.